Hi guys, Jeff at Slavens Racing. This video is about how to install the Slavens Easy idle screw in the 2018 and 19 KTM and Husqvarna 250 and 300 fuel injected two-stroke models. So I already made a video on this, but decided to do a redo with some more in-depth instructions because a few guys are having a little struggle with it. So first thing you need to do is remove the tank and seat, and then remove the muffler bolts, and then remove the Torx bolts that are here on both sides. And then you got to pry up on the subframe. And when you pry up on the subframe, you can pry up on it like if you're on this side of the bike with your right hand, and then take a screwdriver right here and gently pry against the air boot to push it back. Because as you can see right there, maybe you can see it. Let me see if I can get this up here. There's a pretty good lip right there that holds that air boot on, so it doesn't just pop right off. If you just give it a little bit of help right there with the screwdriver, very gently, then it will come right up. You can lift the subframe up and out of the way. So from there, I should back up just a little bit. So obviously you've got to loosen the hose clamp that was right there on the boot, and then leave the front one tight until you get the subframe up so that it doesn't pull the throttle body out of the intake manifold. So leave the front clamp tight, loosen the back one and loosen it a lot, and then do the little prying thing with the screwdriver and push up on the subframe at the same time, and it goes right up. Leave these top bolts tight so that it holds the subframe up. You will need to recheck the tightness on those when you put everything back together. So then we'll go to the next step, and that is to remove that throttle body. So for that, you just loosen this front hose clamp and pull it out. It comes out very easily, and then I'll show you what to do from there. So the next step is to remove this throttle body, and you can see it comes right out. And you need to have the tank off so you can push down on these cables. And then I would also unhook the TPS, the throttle position sensor, which is right behind here. And to do that, there's just this little gray tab right here, which you can grab with your fingernail usually. That one's kind of tough. Just a flat blade screwdriver, and pull that out, and then the whole connector comes out. And you also will need to remove the oil line, which we'll pull off. Now you can get this out here quite a ways. You can remove this cover that houses the pulley with the throttle cables on it. And I just use a pipe spring tool on the top of this. Grab this plastic cover and pop it off of there. It's got a hook on the bottom here. And you will need to modify this cover. You can either cut this section off of here and leave this hook part in there, or you can just use a Dremel and make it enlarge it right there. See if you can see what I'm doing here. Okay. So from there, you slide these rubber boots up, and you loosen the cables. And the cable will pop out. And you do the same thing on the other side. Cable will pop out. And they overlap each other, so this one has to come out first, and this one second. Now you've got the throttle body out here where you can work on it. So this one already has an idle screw put in it, but I'm going to go over the details of how to remove the original screw. That'll be the next step. Okay, now that we've got the throttle body removed from the motorcycle and on the workbench, this is where the tricky part starts. So the idle screw is nothing but a little set screw, and it's right there. And it's Loctited in with some pretty heavy duty Loctite. And guys have been asking me, well, why does KTM do that? Well, it's because they've got to please the European government and the American government with, in regards to pollution, emissions. And so once they've got this thing set, they don't want you monkeying with it. Well, unfortunately, not being able to adjust that creates another set of issues on the correct running of the bike. So you need to, after you remove this plastic cover, then you have access to this hole right here. There's no plug-in or anything. The cover just covers up the hole. And then you have access to the screw. It's a T10 Torx. Some guys have emailed me that a 2.5 millimeter Allen fits in there better. I don't know, I prefer to use the correct tool. But I do want to talk about tools for just a second here. So I bought this set of these from Home Depot because I was in a hurry, didn't have time to go to one of the tool trucks. And it's made by Husky, and I would not buy it again. This is another one I bought at Home Depot, and it's made by Milwaukee. You can see that it's hardened by the black finish. I mean, that could be other things that make it black, but I assume that it's been hardened. And also, the biggest part of it is I don't know if you can see it in this video, but the little flutes here are longer on this one than they are on this one. So this one only goes in about halfway into the screw. So you're not really getting good contact. So you're a lot more likely to round it out. So make sure you've got a good long fluted T10 Torx before you start this job. If you don't, then just stop, go to Home Depot or Ace Hardware or somewhere and buy one. But do not stick in the wrong wrench and round it out. If you round out that bolt in there, it's going to get a little pricey at that point because you're going to have to send it to me or take it to some machinist, and we'll remove it for you. So the next step is to heat the throttle body. And you can see that the set screw, get up closer here, this is the little tab part of the housing where the set screw goes through. So that's what needs to be heated, but you cannot heat from this direction because this pulley is plastic and you will melt it. So you need to heat directly behind it, and off closer to the inside. So I would aim the heat right in this area. Now I tried one of these little Bernzomatic torches that you can get at Home Depot or any store like that, but I just couldn't get enough heat to it. Seems like a lot of people have these, and if you do, you want to put the flame right about in there. I actually went one step farther and I got out my acetylene torch and I put a small tip on it. I think it was a 0 tip, and I aimed it right in here and heated it up. And you got to heat it, with propane you probably have to heat it 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, with the acetylene less. But you got to get it pretty damn hot to break that Loctite loose, to release it. Then at that point, you want to make sure you have gloves on because the throttle body is going to be hot. And get your torque wrench in there, or Torx wrench. And I would take even a little hammer and tap on it to make sure it's down in there solid, and also give just a little bit of impact to it. Do not tap too hard or you could break that aluminum tab in there. Just make sure it's in there all the way. Then put your socket and ratchet on there and loosen it up. When you do that, push down as hard as you can while you're trying to get it to break loose. And they are in there. I mean, it's not, they don't just unscrew. So if you get the temperature right and you have a good torque specs bit, it will come out pretty easily. If you don't, you can create a real mess that could get expensive. From there, you put in your Slavin's Easy Idle screw. And no, we're not, well, excuse me, you got to remove this. I just put that in there for display. So hold on just a second here. So there's what the screw looks like. It's just I think it's a 5mm set screw. Then from there you can screw in your Easy Idle screw. And this is just a prototype version. They will not be coming in orange, at least not for a while, I don't think. They're going to be silver. Then if you measure this distance right here with calipers, set that at about 4.5mm. Just use this part of the caliper, the inside jaws, and measure across there and set the screw to where that gap is 4.5mm, and then your bike is going to be real close to idling correctly when you install it. If you don't, if you have a much smaller gap, well then it won't idle when you start it, and it might start hard, a little bit hard as well. So that's all there is to this part of it. Then I'm going to explain the next step here in just a second. So now you've got the new Easy Idle screw installed, and the throttle body is ready to reinstall, and you can just reverse everything that you did to take it off to put it back on. It's very easy to reinstall it. I'm not going to go through that. Now I have had a couple of guys comment that, because my goal is to, by installing this, is to be able to adjust this, and this is an air screw. KTM in the manual calls it an idle screw, and one place in the manual it says to screw it in, another place it says to screw it out, but you actually have to screw it out to increase the idle, because that increases the air, which changes the fuel-air ratio, makes it leaner. So the more you unscrew this counterclockwise, the leaner your mixture gets. Not only at idle, but above that as well. And so this is not a good way to set your idle. It makes for an erratic idle, to where and quite a few of these bikes that I've been messing with, a lot of them, quite a few of them have a hanging idle problem, to where you rev them up and they idle down real slow. That's called a hanging idle. And that can be a pain in the ass when you're out trail riding, because every time you shut the throttle off, it doesn't really go all the way off. It kind of floats back down. With my method of installing the idle screw here, which is how the 4-strokes are, they've got idle screws on this that operate off the pulley. Then you can use this as it is designed, and that is, it's an air screw. So on most 18 models, 250 models here in the US that I've tuned, I ended up with this that either closed or barely open, like a 1/16 of a turn open. On the 19 models, there's been a bigger variation there. It goes anywhere from closed to a half a turn out. And you just do that to where you get good throttle response and to where it feels like it pulls good on the bottom. My guys have commented on YouTube and via emails that, well, what's the difference? Because when you screw this in, you're rotating and opening the butterfly, and that's letting more air in. When you turn that, it lets more air in. Aren't you doing the same thing? Why are you wasting your time going through this whole process here? But it's not the same. So this is a stop for the pulley. So it controls the opening of the butterfly. It's no different than the idle screw on a carburetor that controls how far down the slide goes. Or, anyhow, so it's just a stop. And when this is open more, yes, it's allowing more air in, but it's not changing the fuel-air ratio. I mean, because as you open this, the ratio doesn't change unless the computer wants it to, the ECU wants it to, the mapping. Whereas this is more unregulated because it's just opening or closing an orifice up in here. So this changes the fuel-air ratio. This does not. That's the difference. So that's why this method works. You put this idle screw in here, then you can close this down because the factory setting is 1.5 turns. That's really lean. So they all feel kind of sluggish off the bottom, and that also contributes to hard starting. So hopefully that's understandable the way I explained it. If not, you can drop me a line, an email, and I'll try to explain it further. But that's all for now. Sorry guys, I almost forgot a couple things. A couple questions that I get asked about, or I have been asked a few times about this. And that is, when you change the idle screw setting, does it change the TPS setting, and do you have to readjust the TPS? Or does it cause any problems? So the TPS, I mean, this is the TPS right here. It's underneath this cover. And if you remove these screws, these are not the factory screws. The factory screws are a Torx bit, a safety Torx bit, to where it has the pin in the middle of it. So they don't really want you taking it off, but you can. And then when you remove these screws, there's also dowel pins underneath there, and they lock it in position, although you can press those dowel pins out if you want to adjust it. So I've done that. I've removed the dowel pins. I've adjusted it both directions with very little positive or negative consequence. It's really kind of a non-issue. I wouldn't waste my time adjusting it. And when you change the idle screw setting, it doesn't seem to cause any problem with TPS. So it's not even worth discussing. It's a non-issue. The other question I get is about this piece right here. If you pull this out and twist it, well, then it stays out. And this is called the cold start button. Why they call it that, I have no idea. Because when you pull it out, it leans the mixture. And what do you normally do on a bike to make them start? You choke them, which richens the mixture. So leaning it for starting is a negative. It does not help the starting. It makes them start harder. So I would never use that. Seems like they should just take that out and eliminate it, but it's there, so just leave it alone. It's not a problem. I think I've covered all the questions. That's all for now.